BBC was also affected by fragmentation of audience. So the VCR, video cassette recorder, I don't know if any of you have even seen VCRs. I wish I had one to show you, but obviously I'm at home and I haven't owned a VCR in this century, so sorry about that. I haven't got a working model for you. But the sort of development of video recording in the home meant that people had different options available to them from their just what was broadcast on TV, and you could also record television programs and watch them later as well. So time shifting viewer habits, giving people control over their own viewing, this was all radical and all served to chip away the audience that television had at the time. See, we call this the fragmentation. This hit commercial TV as well, because if you taped something from ITV, you watched it, then the adverts came on and you fast forwarded through the ads. So where's the advertising? Where's the effect of the advertising? Where's the advertising revenue? Why are we paying for this? So this also affected ITV as well. And the rental market and bought video market became serious competition to TV. Again, rental market, talking in historic terms here, I remember going to the video shop and renting videos, as do millions of other people, and sort of Blockbuster would have been the end point of that kind of industry. The video rental market obviously doesn't exist anymore, but it's interesting to note that Netflix started as a video rental service, DVD rental service really, but when Netflix started, you'd open a Netflix account and they would send you DVDs. They didn't have a television streaming, so they didn't have an online streaming service at that point in time. So they would send you things. They were a competitor to Blockbuster Video. And Netflix business model isn't that far detached really from the idea of a rental store. You pay a monthly subscription and you get to watch things, but you know, you have a very limited amount of download or anything like that once you've watched it. It's always owned basically by Netflix. BBC was on this pretty quickly though. They found video recordings to be a new source of revenue. BBC began the exploitation of programs. So in 1983, there was an edited release of Doctor Who: The Revenge of the Cybermen, and it was released for $39.99. Now the equivalent price in last year, I haven't updated it, but in terms of inflation, it's not going to be too different because thanks to coronavirus, inflation has kind of stopped for a while. £123 basically, an incredible amount of money. BBC's starting to, get a bit business savvy, which is kind of against its public service remit. One of the key innovations, though, of this time is News International, Rupert Murdoch, launching Sky TV, a satellite television service, the first satellite television service in February 1989. There was a competitor service called British Satellite Broadcasting, which was launched in 1990, but these would actually merge. They wouldn't compete with one another very long. It seemed kind of pointless to have competition, so it became British Sky Broadcasting in 1990, in November of that year. BSB as a service only really lasted about 6 months. The impact of satellite and cable was really felt in the 1990s, where we had greater channel choice, filled with big budget shows and repeats, select big name shows, but most importantly, of course, exclusive access to sport, which meant that for the first time, you have a subscription culture emerging in British television, where people will subscribe to a particular service to access a particular type of programming. So post-war governments, basically this is all happening again. So we're out of the 80s, nearly into the 90s now, and we've seen an even increased fragmentation of society. Post-war governments united by Keynesian mixed economy. So what does that mean? Well, in general, governments that came after the Second World War looked at a strong welfare state and full employment as the best way to run things. So you get very good labour relations within that in order to keep everyone happy. Massive commitment to public services. Broadcasting at the time, of the cosy duopoly, reflected that harmony and optimism. However, once that collapses, once the post-war consensus collapses in the 1970s and we see the rise of Thatcherism, unemployment, divisions in society, a politicised environment, and we see a transformation in television into a more competitive, more profit-focused industry. and that sort of fragmentation of society itself is reflected in the fragmentation of television and fragmentation of audience. The second commercial broadcaster, Channel 4, comes on air in 1982, very much a compromise service, publicly owned corporation and a public service broadcaster, but funded by advertising, using this publisher model. You know, Channel 4 is still going strong today. Channel 5, the fifth terrestrial channel, so the third commercial terrestrial channel, launched in 1995. It was licensed in 1995, launched in 1997. Interesting, I remember as I would have been about 18 at the time, you couldn't pick up Channel 5 where I lived. You could pick it up in Swansea, in the middle of Swansea. Actually, weirdly, where I'm sitting now, you could probably pick up Channel 5 fine, but just outside Swansea, you couldn't pick it up. So it was kind of a staggered sort of launch for Channel 5. You might think that might have bothered me, but it didn't, because Channel 5 basically broadcast trash, pretty much. So zeitgeisty getting the Spice Girls to launch the channel in 1997, ages so badly. By the 1990s, where are we at? By the late 1990s, television has now been getting heavily criticised for very cheap, poor quality TV. Lots of American imports, lots of quiz shows, lots of game shows, lots of soaps, a lot of found footage programs such as Police Camera Action, You've Been Framed. Cheap, nasty rubbish, basically. We see the emergence of reality TV in home and garden makeover shows and simulated social documentaries. The first of these would be Airport and Driving School, and actually they're pioneered by the BBC as a very cheap way of fulfilling programming. Driving School, as a cultural touchstone in our society, Driving School might be the worst thing that's ever happened ever. If you can see any episodes of it on YouTube, right, give it a couple of minutes, but it is woefully bad, stupendously bad. And they had this crazy woman from Cardiff on it who became like a mini celebrity, and she was just utterly bonkers. It's terrible stuff, right? It'll rot your brain. If you can see it on YouTube, give it a bash. Reality TV became the dominant sort of mode of television production in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And I think I've probably spoken about Love Island in lectures and things like that before. But Love Island as a reality TV show has been the biggest commercial hit on television for years. Whether it continues, I can't see it continuing in time of coronavirus anyway, but whether it continues after, tragic events with Caroline Flack, tragic events with some of the contestants in the past as well, Mike and Sophie, I don't know. I think it'd be very difficult for the programme to actually continue anymore. But it's a classic example of how reality TV has attracted very important, lucrative audiences for commercial television. So there's actually the emergence of reality TV as a distinct genre happened at the end of the 1990s. The important one in Britain was Big Brother, which launched in 1999. Very, very cheap to make, huge audiences, huge public interest, huge advertiser revenue, plus other income streams like being able to phone in and vote on who should be evicted from the house. Yeah, that's a revenue stream that can be tapped into as well. Anything that happens in the late 90s, though, needs to be contextualized in what is happening wider in media. Excuse me. So, in terms of home take-up of the internet, 95, 96 is a boom time for people using the internet at home after the launch of Windows 95. And by the year 2000, the internet had actually become extremely cheap to access. In the late 1990s, satellite television came down in price as well, so there's a further fragmentation. You get hard disk recorders and DVDs and box sets start to emerge at the end of the 1990s. A hugely more competitive environment. The BBC has still got a fixed license fee, but commercial channels are getting squeezed in terms of revenue as there are new advertising services out there, especially online advertising. So this changing ecology really means that the 1990s is kind of the end point of TV's dominance. It's the end point of TV's dominance in terms of it being a commercial medium, and it's the end point of its dominance in terms of its importance in society. Now, from this point onwards, TV will be competing with other types of media in a way that it can't really compete. If you look at change in audiences, I mean, documentary on the royal family on BBC in 1969, 30 million people. EastEnders, the very famous Den and Angie episode in 1986, 30 million people. Hilda Ogden leaves Coronation Street in 1987, 26 million people. And even up into the 90s, the last ever episode of Only Fools and Horses in 1996, 24.3 million people. Now, those kind of audience figures simply do not exist anymore. They've gone. They've gone forever, and they're not coming back. Even massive sporting events, like when England went to the World Cup semi-finals a couple of years ago and they lost to Croatia. A huge television audience. Now you can virtually assume at that point that you've got about 40 odd million people watching that game. But even then, the television audience isn't that big. People are watching it in pubs, they're watching it together, and so on and so forth. Even those events can't compete with these kinds of numbers. And basically, a huge hit now, like Love Island. What are we talking? 4 to 6 million people? That now constitutes a major success in televisual terms. But it's, we're talking quarter of the size of a normal television, a fifth of the size of what a big television show would have been in the past. In response to a collapsing audience and in response to sort of the end of television's dominance, we've seen massive cuts in jobs across the industry. Even Television Centre in London, the iconic Television Centre of the BBC in London, was sold in March 2013. BBC no longer is there anymore. And I mean, the BBC has taken such a hammering over the past 40 years. I got a timeline of sort of scandals which have eroded the role of the BBC in popular discourse in the United Kingdom. Unpatriotic coverage of the Falklands War in 1982. Coverage of the miners' strike, which was seen as incredibly biased against the miners, and if you want to check that out, have a look at some of the coverage of the the battle at Orgreave in 1984. Interview with Martin McGuinness in 1985. Martin McGuinness, for those of you who don't have any context, was a politician in Northern Ireland. He was the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland as a Sinn Féin politician in the 2000s. He's now passed away. He had cancer, but in the mid-1980s he was primarily associated with the IRA. And Martin McGuinness was interviewed in 1985, and he caused huge controversies. How can you interview Martin McGuinness? This is awful. Blue Peter fakery scandal in 2007. Not even good old Blue Peter can escape. Sort of fake contests and things like that. To the Jonathan Ross Russell Brand thing. Oh my God. This is so stupid. I'm sure you can actually go on YouTube and listen to this. And if you want to, go and have a listen to this. Seems such a long time ago now, and I guess it is 12 years ago. But they prank called an actor called Andrew Sachs, who was best known for his work in the seminal 1970s sitcom Fawlty Towers. And they prank called him because, well, yeah, just get into it. It's kind of disgusting, and in the age of Me Too, it really is vile. And of course, following on, later on than that, the hugely disturbing revelations about the Jimmy Savile scandal, that the BBC, by and large, knew what was going on with Savile and not so much covered it up, but ignored it for years and refused to take action on Savile's prolific career as a sexual deviant, paedophile and rapist. These scandals have basically eroded the importance of the BBC. How has that been reflected in programming? BBC was shut. BBC Three, which is actually quite a success, and launched some really successful programs, including Gavin and Stacey, which is a program I have very little time for, but I know people really like it. But BBC Three was shut down in March 2013, and still these rumblings of privatisation go on. And I think under the Johnson government now, once coronavirus has finally been sorted, that could take a while, this will re-emerge. The digital switchover, which we've all undergone now, You know, it's all done. Transition to digital-only signals began in 2007. Final regions were in 2012. Wales was about 2010 when the analog signal was switched off. TV is now fully digital, part of a completely different ecology of media production, distribution and consumption. And Reese will get into this when he does his lecture on digital media, on the rise of the computer and the development of the internet. So in a digital era, how does television respond? Obviously, we've got changing patterns of use, internet taking a lot of commercial revenue, online news, threat from Web 2.0, video services such as, yay, YouTube, where I am right now. So BBC responded with iPlayer in 2007. It's been actually a really successful element of the BBC's overall offering, the iPlayer, and it's probably one of the few things they've got right. It's not perfect by any means, and they need to do more with their back catalogue on iPlayer, but really it's been one of the few successes. One of the things you can say in the last 20 years that the BBC really did get right, and the timing of it was perfect as well, before really Netflix and other services were big in the United Kingdom. So, you know, how does the BBC sort of exist in today's contemporary market? Well, it's very survival. It's kind of remarkable, to be honest, how it's still going, and it retains a global reputation for quality. The question that we need to ask ourselves is, how relevant is public service broadcasting in the BBC today? I would argue that public service broadcasting in the era of fake news is absolutely critical, but at that point too, I would also argue that the BBC at the moment is not doing well in its public service remit. It needs to have a serious look at itself, and it needs to distance itself from the politicians who run this country in a big way, because much of the political coverage on the BBC seems to be just a set of sort of whispers from government ministers rather than actual serious investigative journalism. So this political intervention and the criticisms that come of it are things which it seriously needs to address if it's going to stay relevant in this day and age. Where we're at the moment, this is taken from Will Merrin's Media Studies 2.0. So even the focus on television might need to be rethought, as my 5-year-old son had already graduated to a tablet, which meant that none of my children were watching television anymore. They watched the odd TV program on their tablets, but watching broadcast content was already a minority activity for them. Indeed, the replacement of the active audience with a hyperactive audience, people too busy multitasking, messaging and sharing to even pay attention, meant that today very few people really are watching television or cinema. Not even Hollywood cinema holds our attention. The biggest SFX blockbuster isn't worth as much to me today as a like on Facebook. WJC simply didn't understand media today, what we're really doing with it. This was written in response to a consultation that Will was involved in about the GCSE syllabus for media studies in Wales run by the WJC. And when he looked at it, and this is only a few years ago, right, this would be 2015 maybe, he looked at the new syllabus that they were proposing for media studies and said this was a syllabus for like the 1980s. You're still getting people to look at magazine covers, you're still getting them to look at television shows. It's like, my kids don't watch television, they don't buy magazines. When are you going to get with it? When are you going to actually, you know, be part of the contemporary thing? And television is part of the contemporary, I would say, but it's a small part of it. Television really is a small element in our digital media ecostructure. You know, it's a type of digital content. It's nowhere near as important as it used to be. It's nowhere near as fundamental to the fabric of society as it once was. So I think Will taps into something really important here. Do we still focus on television? Now, it's important in a history module, a history media, that we do cover television, that we do acknowledge the importance of television as a medium, because it's critically important. But at the same time, we also need to be very, very clear that television and its day, if you like, is done. You know, it is now a service amongst many. Okay, this slide at the end. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm done with teaching you for this year now. Woohoo! Yeah! As I said, Reese's lecture will come up soon. The exam, as it was going to be. Now, I know I spoke about the exam structure in one of the lectures a couple of weeks ago. What I'm going to do is, obviously, you have this slide, right? I'm going to park this for a while, and I'm not going to come back to it for a short while, because I will do an extra video for you guys when I have more news on what's happening with Assessment 2. Okay, at this time I really don't know what is happening with regards to this lecture, with this assessment. I can't say much more at the moment because decisions are being made that are out of my hands, but I'm not going to talk through the exam. If I need to, I will come back to you guys with a video that takes you through the process of what you need to do to prepare for the exam. Whatever form this second assessment takes, there will be 4 topics that you can answer a question on, and it will only be one question. Reese is material on the computer and the internet, and then my material on television, on the radio, and on 20th century newspapers. You will only have to prepare one of those topics, okay? But I'll say no more for now. I will bid you farewell. I bid you safe health, and yeah, look after yourself, look after everyone else around you as well. Obviously, if you need anything, if you want any clarification of this lecture, drop me a comment underneath, yeah, drop me the comment, or get in touch with me via email. If you want to have a tutorial, then drop me an email and we'll set out a Skype meeting. If you want me to read drafts of your essays, you know how to get hold of me. Email me your draft. I will come back to you with feedback. Until hopefully September, I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.